Let me welcome everybody to the Future Trends Forum. My name is Brian Alexander. I'm the organizer, moderator, cat herder, and MC for the hour. I'm very glad to see all of you here. We have a lot to talk about today because we are covering a very powerful and important subject, and we have a wonderful guest to help us through that subject. So just to begin, let me introduce what the forum is, where it came from, how it works, and what we do. So to begin with, you should know that the Future Trends Forum is the outgrowth of the Future Trends of Technology and Education report. That's a monthly trends analysis that goes back 5 years now, taking a look at current developments in education and technology with an eye towards extrapolating them forward into the future. If you haven't seen it before, go to ftte.us, download a few sample reports, sign up if you like. It costs nothing or as much as you want to pay. We have about 2,000 subscribers and a very, very rich report. So again, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, please do. And an important thing is, when we're thinking about the future trends involving technology and education, is remember that they're really a global discussion. That when we talk about them, we can't be bound to one particular nation or region. And that's why I'm very excited to see that the Future Trends Forum has reliably had participants from around the world. You can see from this map that we've had people from East and Central Asia, Europe, South America, all over North America and Middle East. We need to bear this in mind, and I think our guest will actually embody that in a little while. Now, we can only do this with the help of certain support and certain people. I want to thank them and invite you to join them. So to begin with, I want to thank NYSERDAT from New York State, a nonprofit that helps connect New York State's libraries, museums, colleges, and universities. We're very grateful for that. We're also very grateful to Shindig, because Shindig provides this great technology. And just to let you know, let me just remind you, if you haven't seen it before, and let me explain it if you have. The way this technology works is we have two parts of this video screen. The very top where I am and where these slides are, we call it the stage. And this is where presenters who get to be seen by everyone in the crowd. Now the crowd is right here, right below us. If you look around, you can see a bunch of silhouettes. You can see a room and some people looking at us. So there's Ben Harwood looking very cool in his swanky headset. And you can see all those people and they will move back and forth as we go. And if you want to talk to somebody in this crowd, simply double click on their icon. And if they want to speak to you, then your two icons will click together like Lego bricks, and you'll have your own private audio-visual bubble that you can speak in. Now, in the meantime, if you want to collaborate, if you want to communicate with other people, if you want to push questions and comments out to the rest of us, there are actually 3 different ways built into the technology. And we just mentioned them all to you, so you can use whichever one is most comfortable. So to begin with, if you look at the very bottom of the screen, you'll see a white strip that has a group of icons on it. If you look in the left edge, leftmost but one, you'll see a little box that looks like a kind of cartoon dialogue box. If you click that, you'll get a text chat that's open to you and 19 or so people who joined this session with you. You can have a conversation with them. So it's text only, and that works just fine. If, on the other hand, you'd like to contribute a text comment to the whole group, click on that little question mark. If you click on that, up a window will pop, and you'll be able to type in your comment or thought, and we'll flash it on the screen when the time is ready, and I'll read it out loud. Now, if your video is working, your camera is working, and your microphone is working, and you'd like to join us on stage, even better. Just click the raised hand icon, and when the time is right, we'll bring you up on stage so you can talk with Colleen and myself and everybody else who's up on stage with us. If you haven't seen that before, it's really easy to do, and we can do it just in a blink. Now, if you're on Twitter right now, you can also communicate by using the hashtag FTTE. And we've already seen a few different people, hello Roxanne, tweeting away using that hashtag. The reason I mention this is not to show off the technology, although the technology is really good. The point is this is a conversation, not a presentation. It's a discussion. We want to make sure that as many of you feel as comfortable and as ready to participate as possible. Now, I want to thank one other sponsor, and that's actually a group of people. And that's people on Patreon who support my work in the future of education. If you haven't been to this before, Patreon is like Kickstarter, where we crowdfund the support, in this case, for creative people. So if you go to patreon.com/Brian Alexander, you'll see dozens of people who will be contributing to keep my work going, to keep the lights on and to keep the technology humming. We're really grateful to everyone who can contribute, and we really hope you can join us. Now, that's how the technology works. That's how it's all supported. Let me introduce this week's guest. Coming to you from Sweden via her base in Italy, when she's not working for a library in Germany, is Colleen Campbell. Colleen is a brilliant, brilliant person that I met at a scholarly publication conference. She is working with the OA2020 project, which is a drive to get as much of scholarly publication as possible out in the open. We're talking about open access and scholarly publication today. And for those of you who haven't been tracking this as much, remember back a few weeks ago where we met with the founder of the leading open source learning management system, Martin Dugamas. Previously, we've had conversations with Cable Green and other people in the open access world. So open is a major, major theme for us, and I'm glad that we have Colleen here to take us into the open access world. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you could be here. Just to begin with, besides me asking you about Sweden, which I can't stop asking you about, let me ask you instead, tell us about what you do with Max Planck and the OA2020 initiative.
Okay, I personally am the partner development leader for the OA2020 initiative. This means that I talk with institutions, consortia around the world, giving them an understanding of OA2020, what we're trying to accomplish, and also coordinating communications within that community so that we can share best practices and sort of together look toward the future and make a plan to achieve our goals. If I can say add just a little, if I might add just a little bit there. Okay, so the OA2020 initiative is something that is being coordinated by the Max Planck Digital Library, but it is a global effort. So it's something that they have invested in because they believe firmly in this transition, and so much so that they've invested their time and efforts, through me, trying to help promote it.
Very good, very good. That tells us quite a bit. And when you say a global initiative, what nations, what leading institutions are represented now?
Okay, so the OA2020 initiative is global, meaning we have sort of a document, if you will, the expression of interest that you can find on our website. And that document was actually put together and decided upon at one of the Berlin Open Access conferences. You might be familiar with the Berlin Open Access Conference series. It's been going on since 2003, I believe. And this document was drawn up at the 15th in 2015 and decided among the thought leaders who were present there these common goals. So since the publication of this document online, it has been endorsed by scores of organizations, associations, institutions around the world, representing literally hundreds of institutions. So I can share that it has been endorsed by the national licensing bodies or research councils of many countries: the UK, Sweden, Norway, Netherlands, Italy, Finland, Portugal, Turkey, Korea, Japan, South Africa, Brazil. So, yeah, global.
Well, this is huge. I mean, it sounds like you're bringing us news of a global revolution, and we're just in the middle of it right now. Let me just two quick notes for everybody. Again, if you haven't been to the Future Trends Forum, we really want to hear your questions and comments. So again, use any of those three technologies to give us your thoughts and your insights at any point. But the second one, just to remind you, please feel free to ask any question. The open access movement covers a wide range of intellectual domains, from publishing to libraries to technology. So if you have any questions, please don't be shy. We're glad to hear them. And I refuse to let anybody be embarrassed. So and we'll have these questions come in as we go, Colleen. Well, it's 2017. We've been working in open access for almost 2 decades now. How are we doing on this progress towards open? I mean, if we say in the year 2000, all scholarship was closed or proprietary, how far have we come?
Yeah. Not so far. It depends on perspective, of course. Within the OA 2020 initiative and at the Max Planck Digital Library and all of the others who have endorsed it, we've not come far enough. Let's put it this way. You know, there are 3 foundational documents that are part of the OA movement: the Budapest, Berlin, and Bethesda. So it's been nearly 20 years that the open access movement has been around. And if you look at gold open access publishing, meaning what is rendered available immediately upon publication, we're really only at around 15% of scholarly outputs. So depending on your perspective, you know, that's in 20 years nearly, we've gotten so far. But you know, even when we think about the Berlin Declaration, which was looking at taking advantages of the internet and the digital technologies that we have, if you think that that was established in 2003, and you think that we were thinking of access in the 21st century, right? This is what open access was supposed to be. And that access was supposed to be open. Well, we are well into the 21st century and it's not yet open. So yeah, I was, you know, it's not for want of trying. I mean, there have been fantastic efforts going on, and all of these efforts are laudable. You have obviously institutional repositories. You have new publishing initiatives, pure OA publishing initiatives, things like Biomed Central, PubMed Central, PLOS. Yeah, absolutely. New OA publishers, and all of that is fantastic. But it's not been enough to get us where we really need to be. So we think it's time to inject open access into the system. The bulk of scholarly outputs are still locked behind paywalls. If I might continue, we think one of the other problems that is coupled with that, this lack of access, is a question of cost, ultimately. I don't know how many of you here in the forum are from libraries or know much about libraries, but libraries pay lots of money to subscribe to the content that researchers are producing. And those costs continue to grow year after year, well beyond the rates of inflation. So the OA 2020 initiative is specifically geared at trying to put a halt to that, to rein in those costs, because this is that's where the bulk of scholarly publishing is still happening. So we need to act on the subscription model itself.
Well, that's just to remind everybody, we've had a series of sessions on libraries, the future of libraries, and every time this has come up, the escalating costs, especially for journals in STEM fields, which is just enormous and continues to increase. And we can find as well as certain publishers, not to name names, but have enormous profit margins of say 30% or so. So these costs rise. So this is one major motivation that makes sense for open access. What about the other motivations besides saving money? What are some of the other reasons why researchers and library scholars would really want to jump on the OA train?
Yeah, sure. Well, researchers, first of all, I think they have the greatest benefit of achieving impact, right? If your content is open and it's open immediately, you will have greater impact with your research. Another benefit immediately to researchers with the OA 2020 initiative specifically, and we might want to talk a little bit more about that before, but I'll just keep going. I'll talk more about the benefits and then we might come back to what we're trying to achieve, the goals. But being able to publish in the journal of your choice, I think, is also something that's important to researchers, especially in early career researchers, and also benefiting from publishing services that publishers have centuries of experience in. So those are some of the benefits for researchers. For libraries, I think open access presents new opportunities to them. They have an opportunity in the OA world that we envision. The library will have perhaps an even closer role with the researchers, because the cost of publishing will not be sustained by subscriptions as it has in the past, but it will be sustained by actual fees, and then we can talk about what kind of fee models might be appropriate. Fees for publishing, for the publishing service itself. And we see librarians as being partners in that with their researchers. So bringing a closer relationship, for example. Again, institutions and funders would also gain from the impact that that would obviously increase in having their outputs open.
Well, this is a whole series of good reasons for moving towards open. Then I have to ask, because somebody else will ask, I'll beat them to it. Why hasn't this won over? Why haven't we flipped the entire planet to open so far? We've had almost 20 years.
Right. Okay. I think that Bo Christer Bjork from the Henken School of Economics in Helsinki, Finland, he has published a paper recently that I think provides a fantastic analysis of the scholarly publishing system and why we have not yet achieved open access. He uses Porter's 5 forces model to analyze or framework to analyze the competition in scholarly communication. I'm not a business major, so I'm going to look at my notes to help me remember exactly how he does this. Basically, the 5 forces analyze. At the center, you have industry rivalry, and around that, you have 4 other forces that are putting bargaining pressure, right, on the center. So in our world, we have the major publishers, that handful that have well over 50% of scholarly outputs in their hands. They're at the center. And around them, we have the bargaining power of different players in the system. So, for example, we have the bargaining power of the suppliers. Well, in the world of scholarly communications, who are the suppliers? I'm going to abbreviate this. You can read the article, which I highly recommend you do, but I'm just going to pull it down to a nutshell. The suppliers are ultimately the authors, and the authors are giving their goods to the publishers, and they do so willingly. As I mentioned before, for an early career researcher, they want their article to be taken up by Nature, by the highest impact journals out there. So they are not exerting strong pressure for open access directly on the publishers who hold the content locked behind paywalls. Another bargaining force are substitutes. So a substitute, one might consider that to be, for example, institutional repositories. So you have another source of having the same content. But if you look at the deposit rates that we have now of into institutional repositories, they're just not where one would hope they are. And I think the biggest reason behind this is the fact that depositing your work in your institutional repository, it's kind of a bother. It's it's forcing you as a researcher to change your behavior, and changing behaviors is never an easy task. So that's not applying enough pressure to the market. Another force that could exert bargaining power on the market is new entrants. And here we have the likes that we just mentioned, for example, PLOS, BMC, etc. And here you might say some of the problem has been it takes decades for journals first to be to achieve the level of prestige and authoritativeness that the big guys have already obtained over centuries. And it takes a long time for new journals to be indexed, for example, into Web of Science. So they're not, making really strong progress there. And then the final force that could exert bargaining power on the situation are customers themselves, which means the libraries or library consortia. And in that case, right now, the publishers really still have the market in a stronghold. They first of all, they don't have transparency with regard to their pricing. So one institution pays one fee, another pays another fee, and we don't know what the other one is paying. Publishers are putting pricing on their journals or on their journal packages in a way that is geared toward what they think that the market can sustain. It's not really associated with the actual cost of producing, right? So these are the primary forces in a market, and none of them is strong enough to really, break up that stronghold that the biggest publishers who are at the core are holding. Now, within that strong center is the other bargaining force that there might be is industry rivalry. The problem is that, you look at journals and every journal is unique, right? And so there isn't it's not a one-to-one relationship. Wiley has certain, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention publisher names, but Wiley has some journals, and Springer might have other journals, or Elsevier might have other journals, but you really can't compare them one-to-one. So yeah, so basically there is no real strong industry rivalry or bargaining power to force this change into the scholarly communication system.
It's almost a textbook case of market failure. Although if you refer to the publishers, they'd be quite happy to see that as a success. Thank you so much. This is a terrific seminar level explication of this. And again, friends, I was about to exhort you to have questions, but we've got one from Colleen Campbell. And Christian, you can flash it up on the screen. This is a very precise one. How has the open access community responded to Elsevier's recent purchase of PE Press? Dubious setback. Friends, if you haven't been following this, Elsevier is one of the foremost scholarly publishers in the world. And PE Press was started in Berkeley, hence PE, which is basically a repository solution for universities and colleges. It ran itself up until just a few weeks ago. Elsevier just purchased it. So what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, I can't speak specifically to PE Press. What I can say is generally on the strategy of Elsevier, if you go and look on the Elsevier website, you will see that whereas most researchers know them as a publishing platform, a publisher, if you go on their website, you will see that they are, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember the exact wording, but something like data analytics, or
Yes.
it's something. Yeah, it's not about publishing of scholarly content. What does this tell me? It tells me that they are already looking beyond the transition to open access. They know that it's coming. I'll give you a couple examples in just a second. They know that the transition is coming, and so they are already positioning themselves to be ever more a service provider. So they are preparing. In my position at OA2020, I would exhort institutions to think about, well, the open access future, do we want it to be managed and run by the publishers, or do we want to become more involved first person in how all this is going to shake down?
That's a fantastic answer. I like the way that you admit that specific question to the larger issue as well. We have a couple other questions that have just been popping up, but I want to follow up with these questions come first. Jonathan Poritz asks, I'm totally on board, but to be contrarian, basically everything I want as a scholar is available immediately, often not in the finished format, but some content on archive or scholars' websites.
Yeah.
And then there's other archives, right?
Right. Yeah, so there are actually two things happening here, right? There are two things mentioned, scholars' websites or archive. And I think they sort of belong in two different things. So on one hand, the content that's available in repositories of some sort, great. I think that I think a large number of researchers would believe that an actual peer-reviewed copy is something that is desired, right? And as far as the other scholars' websites or other ways of sharing content, that's a whole nother can of worms. As an institution who's investing money in subscriptions, that's something that they also need to think about right now. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, OA2020, our goal is we want to incite institutions to divest of subscriptions and invest in open access. Whatever those open access, I mean, there are all kinds of open access initiatives. We would like to do so in a way that maintains a certain level of stability in scholarly communications. Because when you think about repositories, I mean, if we are putting all of our research outputs into repositories before they actually go to publication, and begin canceling our subscriptions, because after all, we can just find a copy on a repository, at some point, something's going to come crashing down. Because yeah, and that, I mean, some might welcome that eventuality. I think for the good of research on a global scale, it would be best to have a stable transition to open access rather than utter disruption in which everything comes crumbling down. I'm all for disruption to the flow of cash, but I do, I would like to have some level of stability with regard to diffusion of content.
That makes sense. We don't want to go backwards with scholarly research. We have another person who wants to join us with another question on video. Let's see if we can beam them up. There's always this dramatic pause where we need to have
anticipation.
Yes. I need a drum roll. Mike Roy, how good to see you.
Hello, Brian. So thank you for your talk. The question that I typed in, I'm not sure why being on video makes it a better question, but I'll play along. So the picture that you paint is not particularly rosy of what the future looks like. And you mentioned a couple of times, investing in OA is the way to go. College libraries and institutions need to make these investments. Can you talk with a little more specificity about what those investments might actually look like? What are the kinds of things that we can do?
Yeah. Thank you for the prompt, actually. So right now, publishers are receiving revenues from institutions, and of all those revenues, today only about 4% are going to content that is open access. The other 96% are going to support content behind paywalls. All right, so all of this money is going to publishers, and very little is going to support open. Now, when you look at the total amount of money that we are paying in subscriptions to publishers, again, I'm looking at my notes so I can have the exact figure, and I have it in euro. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to bear with me.
That's right.
Yeah, we're looking at 7.6 billion euro annually in going towards subscriptions. Now, divide that by 2 million articles, which are published a year, and you get an average cost per article of around 3,800 euro. Okay, that's what's happening today. If you look, on the other hand, at the actual cost of publication of articles open access, so looking at pure open access articles, and we sort of documented this by, I don't know if you're familiar with the Open APC initiative. The Open APC initiative, it's completely open to anybody. If you are already paying APCs, I invite you to contribute your data to Open APC. That way we can get better empirical evidence. That, if we look at that, the actual cost per article is much lower. It's less than 2,000 euro. So what does this show? That shows, as Brian was referring to earlier, a profit margin of around 45%, which is a buffer of 2.8 billion euro a year. So the actual logic behind OA2020 is explained in a white paper published by the Max Planck Digital Library in 2015 that says there's already enough money in the system. We're not asking more money to be put into the system. We're actually looking for new ways to contain the costs. Because if we can get to a scenario where publishing is open, the costs behind the publishing will be open too, as you can see from the Open APC initiative. We know how much it costs to publish. Once it's open, then we introduce the element of competition that was missing in the 5 forces analysis that we just talked about, because we'll be able to see. And at that point, researchers seeing the cost between publishing from one journal to another, and maybe comparing the impact factors, if we're still looking at impact factors then. I'm not saying we need to. That might invite them to do a little bit more thinking about where they want to do their publication. That answer the question?
Just a quick question. Oh, go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
Well, she asked me a question. I want to. So yes and no. I mean, I think the what Elsevier has told us recently is that they are now the largest open access publisher, and so they're more than happy to participate in open access, and they just charge APCs that are usurious and therefore continue to enjoy their profits. And so one of the critiques I've heard of the OA 2020 move is its heavy reliance on APCs. And so maybe a follow-up would be, is that either maybe that's wrong and you can correct it, or what are the alternatives to APCs that might kind of level the playing field so that places that may not be able to afford even 2,500 euro per article can still play in the system?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let me first clarify. Yes, the analysis in the white paper was done to understand the economics of the market using APC data, article processing charges, for people who don't know what that is, merely because that was the metric that was available 2 years ago. That's so OA 2020 is not married to the concept of APCs. We would actually encourage any number of open access publishing cost business models, if you will. And there are others out there. You have Lingoa, you have Open Library of the Humanities, Knowledge Unlatched. You have efforts transitioning to open access in a number of ways. Free the Science, the new initiative by ECS. So there are lots of models that are coming out now. And so I think absolutely looking at any number of models, I think is a good thing. Regarding Elsevier being, the biggest OA publisher, I think that's an interesting point in that right now, as I said before, the publishers understand that open access is a reality that's going to come about. I mean, you have half of Europe, if not all of Europe, already with mandates saying the content has to be open. So it's going to happen. In the meantime, in the next years, while we're waiting for it to happen, they are cashing in as much as they can. And I don't want to sound like I'm against publishers. I personally am not against publishers. I mean, there might be differing views out there, but publishers provide a service. Publishers are cashing in on it. If you look at right now, the titles that are growing the most, they are open access titles. If I look at the Max Planck Digital Library, the Max Planck Society, and our researchers, and analyze where they are publishing, first of all, the top 20 publishers, 80% of our outputs are published by 20 publishers, right? So it's the 80-20 rule. Of those, 5 are open access publishers. Then you look at folks that are traditional publishers like Springer Nature. They have we have seen the biggest explosion in publication in 2 journals, Nature Communications and Scientific Reports. Right, those are exploding. So what does that tell me as a library? It tells me, first of all, that the researchers are finding the money to get published somehow, right? Because it's not just happening at Max Planck Society, it's happening at institutions all over. So somehow the researchers are finding the money. We think, or what we're trying to do specifically at the MPDL, is to get our arms around that. I mean, as libraries, we manage the subscription, the relationship with the publishers for our subscriptions. There's other activity happening there with our institutions, and we would like to manage the entire relationship, right? And if we can do that, if we can get our head around not just the subscription, but also the open access publishing that's happening, that puts us in a better position to then negotiate with the publisher, right? So that's just kind of what we're trying to do.
Mike, thank you. By the way, Mike is Mike Roy, Dean of Libraries at Middlebury College, and a wonderful person that you guys should
Middlebury?
pay attention to.
Middlebury,
yes.
yeah.
Middlebury, Vermont.
Alma mater. I got my MA at Middlebury.
Oh, all right.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Which language? Oh, sorry.
Italian. Italian.
Well, we have a few more questions coming up, and I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to address you, Colleen. Here's a text question from Mark Wilson. longtime friend of the forum, and he asks, how can students leverage open access and scholarly journals to start learning how to publish as undergrads?
Wow.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that is good. My first advice would be go talk to your library. I mean, librarians are there specific. I think for that. This is one of the opportunities I was saying before. It's an opportunity for librarians to have closer relationships with their researchers, and if you start with students, the students will become researchers. That would be my short answer there.
That's a good answer. Yeah, Mark is someone. He's a brilliant thinker. His questions are always fantastic. And we have another question from Celia, but I think Celia is on video. Can we bring her up? Let's see. Again, we have the dramatic moment. We have to get the camera working and the connection up, and we'll see if it all comes together. Here we go. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Hello, Celia.
Hi, can you hear me?
Very well. Where are you today?
I am in Keene, New Hampshire, so it's another New Englander heard from.
Hey, that's the sun out there, I'm told.
It's cool. It's a nice day. Yeah. So just an FYI, just as we've been talking, for those of you who are BPress users, as we are, we just got an email from someone at Elsevier. First contact from Elsevier. So I'll be curious to go read that email after we're done here. I wanted. In fact, my comment is really follows up on the previous one, and it has to do with the struggle, I think, as what is happening appears to me to be a kind of emerging, potentially difficult inequality, meaning, I live in the state that ranks 50th in state support for higher education. I work at a small public liberal arts college. I've been here for 3 years and have been cutting my budget since the day I arrived on campus this year in somewhat actually fairly catastrophic ways as a result of enrollment decline. And our researchers are not folks who are finding it that easy to look for that APC money, and they're coming to the Faculty Development Grant Committee for that. What I'm really interested in is the fact that you talk about, and there are a lot of models out there. I think we're reaching a point where many of us at institutions that are really under-resourced are really looking for ways to benefit from templates, benefit from some sorts of really creative consortial arrangements, some way in which we can aggressively begin to participate and move because we really want to, in ways that are sustainable, in ways that our faculty and administrators will understand, and in ways that will be effective. We have a very, very robust open access collection development policy. We label all of our open access resources. We actively talk about them because we have a very strong open education, open pedagogy model here. But it's still difficult for us to move away from those kinds of cancellations that I would love to do, soon, partly because faculty are concerned. And so I'm just thinking about, I see MIT down the road and places that have really exciting, robust initiatives because they have money. And I'm trying to figure out how those of us who don't can not only just sort of tag along behind, but help kind of take the lead on this when we want to.
Yeah. Well, I think you said it before in the sense of consortia. I think consortia are one way to address this. Certainly, that's the OA2020 initiative is intended to be a global initiative because publishers are global, and so in order to meet them at eye level, we have to have some sort of coordinated effort going on. Now, that doesn't specifically address your problem, if you will, your situation as a small liberal arts college, and certainly the transformation that we're looking at is focused primarily in STEM journals. That's where all of the budgets are tied up right now. How every year institutions have been chipping away at their monograph budget or the liberal arts to sustain the big STEM publications. So this is also part of the strategy. If we can get to the point where we do flip those models and take the money away from the STEM subscriptions, the buffer that I mentioned before is also there, and the funding that you would be able to save then with the STEM side could be reinvested, given back to humanities areas, be reinvested in publishing initiatives, your own university press, for example. I mean, that's, yeah, I get it. The OA2020 initiative is going to be, if you look at publication trends around the world, it would take the 100 institutions. If 100 institutions positioned strategically around the world sat down with the publishers and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to transition now, and it's going to be a stable transition. The flip would happen. So it is that, you know, those institutions with the highest research output that are going to be driving this big transformation. But our idea is that once that's done, it will free up funding to then support the humanities and liberal arts and everything else. And we're not necessarily purporting that, yes, that we need to flip, I don't know, medieval history journals to an APC model. I don't think we're necessarily saying that. The humanities are a special case, and we need to think about the models, the economic business models that are going to support them and be feasible. But it could be any community funded initiatives, as I said before, university presses, any number of things.
Celia, can I build on your question for a second?
Sure.
Colleen, do you think there's any role for expanded governmental support for higher education and scholarly publishing? I mean, should we be lobbying for regional, in the US, state, elsewhere, national governments for assistance in this?
That is such a hard question. I mean, I'm American, you can tell by how I speak, but I've lived in Italy longer than I ever lived in America. And the difference in the funding situations is so striking, or the way funding is organized is so striking. And I'm quite honestly a bit at a loss when it comes to the US situation. I would step back and talk about, yes, library consortia for, you know, OA2020, it's about the spending of your subscriptions. And so this is why I continue to talk about libraries, because they're the ones who are paying, but it's an institutional question. But consortia would be the way to go. This is why I think there has been such success in Europe, because licensing of content happens at a national consortium level. And unfortunately, we don't have that situation in the US, but I think there are consortia that are becoming more interested. Well, I can speak to that consortia are becoming more interested in the US. We've had discussions recently with, at the ICOLC meeting, the meeting of consortia, and people are starting to get interested. So I think if you belong to a consortium and you start talking to your consortium coordinators about, you know, well, what could we do here, or forming a consortium and, yeah, thinking about negotiating particular deals, that might be a strategy. I mean, we would happy to share experiences as well. You know, it's a community, so.
Yes.
I think there's a strong, you know, public good argument that could be made for that kind of contribution. I'm just not convinced that that argument is going to be very effective right now, but it should be, but I'm not sure that it would be.
I think you're right. Celia, did you see when we had Professor Chris Newfield here a few weeks ago talking about the defunding of public higher education?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a key point for him. In fact, his recent book, that's his ultimate argument, is that we need to revalue academia as a public good.
Exactly, yeah.
Too thoroughly privatized it. That's, of course, a very different model from European states. Thank you, Celia.
Thanks.
We have another question coming in from Roxanne Riskin, great fan of the forum. Let's see if we can bring Roxanne up on stage. In that moment of pause. And hello, Roxanne.
Good afternoon.
Oh, it's great to see you. Where's your puppy?
He's sleeping.
Oh, okay. Oh, we'll allow
it's that time.
Well, welcome. Okay. What's your question?
My question is, what do you know about the American Library Association, and what are their actionable plans with OA with regard to higher education? And also public libraries. Where do public libraries fit into to this with the open
Yeah.
access resources?
Yeah. Wow. I unfortunately don't have an answer to either question, I'm afraid. It's interesting when you think about public libraries in Europe, in many cities, the city public library and the university library are one and the same. So, the question is kind of moot, there. And ALA as well, I honestly don't have a sense of that. Brian, I don't know, in your experience, if you have anything to offer.
Well, the ALA is interested, but it's difficult. They have a really, really diverse membership. I mean, everything from corporate libraries to giant publics to small rural libraries. So I think this is something we should revisit. I should talk to some people from ALA and see if we can get them to come to a forum and talk about it, because this is a powerful angle. I mean, they're the biggest group in the U.S. for libraries and scholarship.
Their voice would be very important to
Yes.
all of us.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's
you.
an important one to mention. Friends, we're down to almost the last 10 minutes of today's forum. So let me just remind you all that we have time for more questions and comments. As you can see from having Mike and Celia and Roxanne up on stage, it's easy as can be to ask a video question. If you prefer to type in a text question, we're ready for that as well. We have a great one from Jeannie Kim Allen. Hello, Jeannie. She asks, one of the issues I've seen with a lack of open access has been in terms of equity for students. Oh, could you bring that question back up? I just missed the last part of it. There's an automatic cycle built into this. She continues, I cannot access certain articles via my work, public institution, but can via my alma mater, a private university. That's a great point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the open access transition that we are looking for, it's all of that goes away because it's open to the public, everyone, all over the world. It's the final integration of scientific knowledge and common knowledge. If we achieve the transformation that we want, it will be open for everyone, and the problem goes away.
It's a fantastic phrase, the final integration of scientific and common knowledge.
Common knowledge, yeah.
Wow, that puts a period to the end of 400 years of scholarship going back to the British Transactions of the Royal Society. That's wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic question, Judy Kim, and that's another reason for supporting open access. We have another text question comes in from Tom Hames, who asks, where are most of the textbook expenditures going? Are they going to 101 textbooks? Those are the easiest to replace with open content, in my humble opinion. Now, that's true, Tom, for OER. I mean, 101 textbooks can be really, really pricey, again, especially for STEM, as well as some of the social sciences. Go ahead.
I personally don't have figures regarding textbook expenditures. I can tell you a little bit about what's happening in Europe, but it's very anecdotal. So in the UK, I think there's a lot of licensing going on at a consortium level for e-textbooks. I don't know how helpful that is, and there the syllabi sort of correspond to reading lists, and reading lists. Yeah, if you have open content, so much the better, right? But yeah, I personally don't have a lot of experience specifically with e-textbooks, but of course that's a benefit that would come about if we have open access to content.
I had a couple of questions while there's a pause, while the forum audience is assembling its final thoughts. One question is about this transition of publishers from being content publishers to being, for lack of a better term, data providers or data analysts. That seems like a viable transition model. And you could think of other industries where that's occurred. You could think of, for example, television, where Netflix has made the data analytics a huge engine for productivity. How should the open movement respond? Should the open movement, for example, try to generate its own data analytics, or should we welcome them to the fold in the future?
Well, I think if we can transition to open access, that is what is going to spawn all kinds of innovation. If you think about the music industry, right now, all of the efforts are tied up in keeping things locked behind paywalls. And if we could just take all of that away and let the publishers focus their efforts, but not only the publishers, the institutions themselves, let everybody invest our time and our efforts into innovative services. We're all going to benefit from that. Whether it's having to do with digital humanities or research data management or text and data mining, there are all kinds of there's all kinds of potential that right now is not being used because we're so focused on the paywalls, and because the content is behind the paywall, we can't get to it to do the text and data mining. So if we can get to the transition and unlock the paywall, then there's going to be an explosion of services, and I think I think it'll be a good thing for publishers to do that, but not only publishers.
Well, that's another, I think, benefit that we should emphasize and try to convince people of OA. And this is a benefit for open education resources, and this is a benefit for open source software. But the idea of open as a spur to innovation is tremendous. Jonathan Parts has a question. And let's bring him. Oh, if we can bring him up on stage, that'd be great. Let's see where he is. Hi, Jonathan.
Can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So you mentioned both of you actually both briefly mentioned music, and this whole discussion reminds me a little bit of technical discussions about DRM, digital restrictions management, in the music distribution industry. I worked in industry for a while, and the technical people all said DRM is dead on arrival. It's a technology has no future, and and so the question was, what's going to happen to the music distribution industry without DRM? And similarly in OA, it seems to me the technology it's clear that the big publishers, they add no value. There is no future to them. I don't want to upset you, Colleen, or anyone in the library.
No.
It's not clear to me that libraries really have a future. As a scholar, I want to get on the net. I want access to the world's scholarly publications. I don't know if I have to do it through my institution's library or a consortium library or just through Google Scholar. But the things that I think, if we forget for a moment about those large institutions like publishers and libraries, the two things that we haven't mentioned at all in this conversation so far today are signaling. I mean, it seems to me that publication in a respected journal is a part of a career path for a young scholar, and that's the expensive thing. That's the value added at the moment by the publishers. If I get a publication in Annalen der Mathematik, I get much more chance of getting tenure than if I don't have that if I open access publish my work. And that's one variable. Another that we also haven't mentioned is peer review and guaranteeing the quality of scholarly publications. It seems to me that if mechanisms could be found to do signaling of what the community thinks is high quality research and of what the community thinks is valid new knowledge, then publishers and libraries can all disappear, which I'm not sure I would be sad about.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I don't know.
There's a lot
there. What does the OA? What does OA 2020 think about how we're going to do peer review, or we're going to do signaling and padding your CV with the right kinds of publications?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, there's a lot there. So OA 2020 specifically wants for the they want to transition subscription journals to open access. Okay, so for the moment, we are looking at retaining subscription journals. So the publishers stay the same, the journals stay the same. We're just changing the cash flows underneath the journals. Okay, that's the first step. Once that happens, it's a level playing field, and anything can happen. New publishing initiatives, maybe new publishers, new journals come about. In the meantime, we could think about new promotion and tenure systems. Right now, I mean, a lot of people might argue that that's the real problem. We need to redo promotion and tenure to not rely on journal impact factor, for example. And that's a valid argument. And we should be thinking about DORA and lots of other things. I have to say, though, right now, and I don't know how clear this is to people's minds, but half of the world's higher education systems right now are based precisely on journal impact factor. So it's going to take a long while before we change that, and also sort of change the mindset of researchers. The OA 2020 strategy is, let's flip the journals now, and we have the feasibility to do it in a rapid way. Then we can continue the efforts to change promotion and tenure and everything else. And speaking to the go ahead.
So you're offering publishers take a fraction of a percent as profit instead of 30%, because otherwise you'll be dead.
Yeah. Basically, for the publishers, it's a win-win situation as well, ultimately, I think, because this is an opportunity for them to partner. I mean, I used to work for a publisher, and that's the ideal. In any business relationship, you want a partnership. You want to understand your customers' needs and help them achieve those, right? Achieve their goals. So if this is an opportunity for publishers to partner with institutions on creating a new world order, I see it.
But it just strikes me that asymptotically we're going to zero profits if following a model that you're describing, of just using consortia to bargaining power to get it weighed in. If the profit goes asymptotically to zero, as a technologist, I would think, well, let's just jump to the end where it's when the profit is profit margin is zero, then there's no incentive for me to publish with Elsevier or with Springer. I might as well publish with Archive and stop at Archive. And so my question is, once we've made that transition, if it seems to be that if they're not idiots, the publishers are looking at you and saying, you want us to take the first step toward our own extinction. And
yeah.
In
the meantime, they're developing added services. I mean, they already provide services, and in the meantime, they're developing more services, right? And I said before, innovation and technology, right now, they are best positioned because they already have their platforms, right? They've already got lots of stuff that they can build on, and I think that's the key to them. They could stop investing their time in in locking access and invest the time in building out better services that are going to benefit research ultimately. That's their goal as well.
Friends, I hate to stop us at a moment of existential terror, but I have to, because we are right at the last minute of the session.
Okay.
And my gosh, John, I would love to follow up and ask if there's anything we can learn from the music industry, thinking about Spotify and so on. If you could, John, please email me. I'd like to follow up with you on this.
Sure.
But for right now, Colleen, please let me thank you. This has been a fantastic conversation. I feel like I've been in a seminar with one of the world's experts, which is what you are. And you have been fantastically generous with your time, with your thinking, and you've handled a great variety of questions. And let me thank the forum. Everyone from Roxanne to Shang Kim to Gardner, you guys have had very, very challenging and rich questions. I think we found, as with open access, with open source, as with open education resources, that the open question here cuts into so many different strata of academia, intellectual life, economics. I'm astonished at how well all of you have handled this. So thank you so much.
Thank you all.
We have to put up the slides for next week, but again, thank you all.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. So now that we've completed our trifecta of open, with open access, effort to open education resources, and effort to open source software, now we shift ground to the question of education, technology, and the United States. Next week, we have a return guest, the wonderful Manuela Caldwell, who came to us to speak about all of education policy from her work at New America, joined by her colleague Rachel Fishman. They have a terrific paper, a lot of great challenges, a lot of great questions. Please be here for that. We'll send you more information about this by email. But that's going to be a very, very powerful meeting, I think, especially as we watch policy questions begin to stagger around. Now, between now and next week, there are other things you can do as well for the forum. So, for example, you can go to the FTTE.us homepage if you'd like to learn more about FTTE. You go to shindig.com if you'd like to learn more about this software and this platform. And in the meantime, keep thinking about all of this. Follow me on Twitter. Please stay in touch. And again, thank you all for thinking about this really powerful, deep, and very, very important material. We'll see you next time.